few years ago, my wife, daughter, and I were spending a lazy afternoon at a quiet lake. It was the kind of place where time slows down and you can pretend the world doesn't exist. After we ate, my wife decided to take a swim while I stayed on the shore with our toddler. I watched her wade into the water, her figure illuminated by the sunlight sparkling off the surface. Everything was serene until it wasn't. She stopped abruptly, mid-step, and turned to me, shouting. I couldn't hear her at first, but the way she froze, her shoulders stiffened, and her head tilted slightly, as if she were trying to process something horrifying. Finally, her voice cut through the air. I think I just stepped on someone's face. I froze. For a second, I thought she was joking, but when she started moving, almost stumbling, toward the shore, her face told me everything. She was pale, her eyes wide, her breathing shallow. When she got back to me, her voice was trembling. She said that while swimming, her foot brushed against something soft. At first, she thought it was seaweed or a rock. But when she pressed down, she felt the unmistakable shape of a face beneath the surface, a nose, an eye socket, even the hollow of the eye itself. I considered going in to check, but my gut told me not to. There was a coldness in the air now, and the water suddenly seemed darker. We packed up quickly and left. The next day, the news confirmed it. A young boy who had been missing for days was found drowned in that same lake, just a few feet from where we'd been. My wife is convinced she stepped on his face, and sometimes I wonder, was he trying to reach her, or was something else keeping him there? In 2018, I was living in Nebraska, in the largest city in the state, though it was still surrounded by endless corn and wheat fields. On the outskirts of town, rich families were building massive houses on sprawling properties right where the city blurred into the countryside. A good friend of mine lived in one of those houses, and we spent a lot of time there. His place was amazing. Tons of land for riding 4x4s, a hot tub, and a huge living room where we'd watch sports and scary stories like this one every week. So if you made it this far, subscribe. His parents were super chill and didn't mind if we drank, as long as we stayed at the house. It was the perfect spot for hanging out, though I never liked going outside at night. The area was so dark and isolated, it felt like the shadows were alive. Getting to his house was always eerie. You had to drive down a long, winding road lined with thick trees on both sides, passing one of the city's largest cemeteries. The road was poorly lit, with only the occasional street lamp, and there was rarely any traffic. It always gave me a strange, heavy feeling, and I'd speed through it whenever I could. One spring night, I was driving to his place around 10 p.m. The weather was perfect, so I had my windows down and music playing. As I came around one of the sharp curves, I had to slam on my brakes. Right in front of me, in the middle of the road, was what looked like a family. There was a tall, slim woman, an average-sized man, and a child who looked about 8 years old. The woman was pushing a stroller. They weren't carrying flashlights or any kind of light source, which meant they'd been walking in complete darkness before I showed up. I stopped the car and waited for them to move, but they didn't. They just kept walking down the center of the road, completely ignoring my headlights and the sound of my car. The hairs on my arms stood up. Then, without warning, they all stopped at the same time. Slowly, they turned to face me. I didn't even give myself time to process what I was seeing. My stomach dropped, and I threw the car into reverse, speeding backward as fast as I could. After about 20 seconds, I flipped a U-turn and gunned it in the opposite direction. I didn't care if I ran off the road. I just wanted to get away. The only detail that stuck in my mind was the stroller. It was empty. When I finally made it to a main road, I checked my rearview mirror over and over, but they were gone. I asked my friend and his family about it, but they just looked at me like I was crazy. To this day, I don't know what I saw. Maybe it was a family playing some kind of cruel joke. Maybe it was something more sinister. Whatever it was, I'll never forget how scared I felt. I'm a teenager and I've been in Boy Scouts for nearly all my life, and I really enjoy exploring with my friends and being trusted more as I'm older now. A few years ago, me and two girls named Amy and Harriet were asked to head into the woods surrounding our campsite to find a long, straight stick suitable for carving into a point. Bear in mind that I was a lot younger back then. Harriet was older, and Amy only 1 year older than myself. We had been walking in deliberately the same direction as to not get lost, and memorizing the surroundings as we went, in order to find our way back easily. About 15 minutes in, we couldn't find anything to take back, so we turned around to return to the campsite. That's the initial panic set in. The trees had almost unnaturally knitted themselves together in such a way that it seemed our path was non-existent in the first place, like it had just vanished. We looked around 360 degrees, and now everything looked exactly the same. Trees we could have sworn were different from one another appeared as all copies of the same tree. We kept walking in what we thought to be the correct direction, while shouting out for help, and eventually came to a concrete path, almost like a road, but very thin, separating the forest, splitting it into two. We didn't follow the road as it went in the wrong direction to our campsite. On the other side of the path was more forest. However, nearby was an abandoned shack, likely used for storage or whatever else. We had no idea anything like this was out here in these woods, so we just kept walking. We eventually came to a road we didn't recognize. A woman wearing a pink and purple regatta outdoors coat walked past, and we frantically asked her for the direction of our campsite, as by now, according to our watches and Harriet's phone, we'd been walking for an hour and a half. She said she had never seen us before, but she said there's another campsite in that direction. We followed her advice and eventually came back to our campsite. We frantically apologized for being so long and that we couldn't find anything. The leader, Ian, could see all three of us were shaken up, and he stated confused that we'd only been gone 25 minutes and that our free time was still going on. To this day, this baffles all three of us, as our free time was 40 minutes long and our watches and phones had said we'd been gone for hours. The forest, we were lost and felt crushing and claustrophobic, like we'd entered an area that the concept of time didn't apply to. I believe in the paranormal. However, this was so unlike anything I've heard or experienced before. It literally was like we'd been in a time vortex or something, and that hours in the forest were only minutes in the rest of the world. The feeling was very strange, and it stuck with me for the rest of the camp.